All right. Good evening, everyone. I now call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Burlington Electric Commission held on the second Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. here at 585 Pine Street in Burlington. Today is April 8th and the time is 5 o'clock on the dot. Let the record show that a quorum is present. Commissioners, you've received the agenda for today's meeting. I understand that there's a oh no, that's the minute. Excuse me. You received the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any proposed amendments?
We have a proposed amendment, if that's
Great.
okay. Two, actually.
Okay.
One would be just, it doesn't have to be changed on the agenda, but we're not going to be filling the monthly impact minute this evening. We do have Chris here for the energy efficiency check-in, but we don't have somebody filling that item. The second is we can officially delete or remove item 11 with your consent, of course. We will keep the executive session discussion, but we are not at a point where we need a vote, so we do not need the public session discussion and vote item this evening.
Are there, go ahead.
Does someone need to move to accept the amended agenda? So
Yes.
I move to accept I move the amended agenda.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We have all 5 approved. And we can move on. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. So, the minutes from our previous meeting held on March 11th have been distributed. I understand there was corrections to those minutes and they've been handed out in paper form in front of you. I believe everyone should have a copy? Yes. Correct? Okay. Do we all need a pause for a moment to make sure we've looked through those?
Yes.
Is there a highlight of the corrections?
I don't know what the corrections were. I think there were some sections that were missing or omitted, like the financial review and
Okay.
the budget overview. I know that those were some of the pieces that were not added in the original that Katie had done, and it wasn't signed. So Katie signed this one.
Okay.
There were some sections that were there, though, from reviewing it to this one. So,
Yes.
so it looks like omission, not changes. That's what it
I
looks like
believe
from
so.
scan.
Oh, I see.
I'm gonna give everyone one more minute. Are there any discussion we have to have on the updated packet that was received tonight?
Good question.
Yep.
How will the updated, since the minutes in the packet are incomplete, we're gonna be voting on these minutes, how will the approved minutes be made available?
I will update, once they're approved,
Yeah.
I'll update this new version, I'll put on Civic Clerk.
Okay, great.
As the final.
Okay.
One more second. Anybody else? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the updated minutes that we received this evening?
I move to adopt the updated minutes.
Great. Second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
5 ayes, and the motion passes. Great, thank you. Okay. We will now move into the public comment period. I now open the floor to any public comment. Each speaker is asked to state their name, keep their comments to 5 minutes. Do we have any? It doesn't appear to be anyone on the phone or anyone in the room. We, as a commission, welcome public comment. Please join us. We do want to hear from the public and welcome you to come join us or join online. And I know we had some disruption last month at the some technical difficulties, but all seems to be in order. So please rejoin if you had hoped to connect or engage and had any questions. Okay. The next item was the monthly impact minute, and as we've all discussed, that is no longer on the agenda. So now I will move us into the Commissioner's Corner. It's an opportunity for any commissioners to make a comment, raise a question, represent any public comments that they've received. Are there any topics commissioners would talk about tonight? I'm hearing none.
I had
Yes.
just a small question. I think maybe now is the time. Just wanted to know the status of the battery well, it wasn't a proposal, but
Sure.
offer for proposals.
Yeah, we had issued an RFP last year, and we've been reviewing, and we've gone a bit slower more recently because we're prioritizing both short-term energy needs as well as replacing expiring contracts. So the battery is probably, third in the queue behind some of those priorities with our power supply team. And there's a couple of solar proposals as well that we're interested in reviewing and considering that will probably be after the batteries. So we're trying to sequence some things there, and that one remains in process, but no immediate action steps until we can get through these power supply items, some of which we'll discuss in the executive session.
Do you have an estimated time on when you think you'll get to it?
My goal is that we would be in a position this year to advance a battery proposal, provided it's economic, to the commission, the city council, and move it forward into a permitting process. But I'm conscious that we have a good number of key priorities that we're kind of juggling both on the power supply and the regulatory side that also demand attention. So that's my goal, is certainly to advance that this year to a tangible place, provided the economics are favorable.
Are there any other Commissioner Corner comments that folks would like to bring up? Okay.
No, not at this time.
Is there anything in response?
I did not get a response.
Okay. Now we're moving on to the GM update.
Okay. So, speaking power supply, we did have a good piece of news, which was, since our last meeting, that we have a renewal with Sheffield, an extension for 5 years. So we had a press release that's also in the packet, but we're pleased to be continuing with Sheffield for an additional 5 years. Appreciate that. Regulatory and legislative update, wanted to share that H940, which contains the provisions we worked on with the Department of Public Service to extend some authority to do the pilot authority essentially within our efficiency TEPF program. That bill passed the House on a voice vote and is now in the Senate Finance Committee. I believe we'll be testifying this week on that in Finance, and I believe it may then move to the Senate Natural Resources Committee before the full Senate would consider it. So that remains in process, has passed the House and is over in the Senate. So we appreciate that. I don't have any other major updates on any of the items there in terms of legislative. We continue to have a number of different dockets moving on the regulatory side, continue to have a lot of process within the Demand Resource Plan, the DRP. So we're working on that, and obviously If the legislation passes, then we can update our proposal within the DRP to reflect the kind of newer parameters from the legislation. So we're working on that. We have the PUC council position reposted. It's now called principal council. We tried to change a few of the requirements to make it hopefully more inviting to a broader pool of applicants. So we're hopeful that within the next month, as that position closes, we can move to an interview process and have somebody join us in that position in the not distant future, help with our various regulatory items. I'll mention as well, I think we discussed previously, but the FY25 rate case was approved at the 4.33% level as opposed to 4.5 to address the one-time issue that we had tried to address in the prior rate case, but has now been addressed in this rate case. I should say it's the FY26 rate case that was approved. The FY25 was the one-time issue. So rates will be at 4.33%. We have submitted a plan to the PUC for how to handle the refund of the difference between the surcharge that was in effect in bills as of last September through the date by which we have the 4.33 go into effect. So we've submitted a plan. We're waiting on the PUC to give us any feedback on that. We filed compliance tariffs related to a variety of things. Some of those are awaiting feedback. Some of those are in process. Suffice to say, for most BED customers who remain a BED customer currently, they would receive a credit back on the bill against a future bill in all likelihood, assuming our plan is accepted. It gets more complex when you have a customer who perhaps was a customer at the time but is not a customer now, and we have a plan for how we can try to track folks down and get them their refunds and work on that. So we've submitted that at length to the PUC. We have our 2026 Jim Reardon BED Public Service Award coming up on April 15th, Wednesday of next week. We appreciate the chair. Previously, Chair Moody joined us for some of these reviews. We had Chair Bond join us for the review this year. And of course, folks are welcome to join us here in the Spark Space April 15th, provided we don't have a quorum of the commission. So 2 commissioners perhaps would be welcome to join us. And we'll have members of the Reardon family here, and we'll look forward to honoring our awardee for 2026. And that'll be 12 noon next Wednesday, the 15th, right here in the Spark Space.
Are you planning on doing
I am, yeah,
that? Can I join you?
yeah. Sounds
There-
great.
There's 2.
That's 2, yeah.
I just want to
deal.
say goodbye to the people.
We would love to have you.
I won't
Great.
see you again.
No, please do join us.
That's great.
Wanted to highlight that BED, for the second year in a row, we've played a role in organizing the Electrify Vermont Summit in partnership with UVM, Renewable Energy Vermont, a variety of different partners. This was really an effort that we had last year to try to bring together under one roof, one convening, all the various partners and entities that are working on a piece of electrification, whether it's EVs, EV charging, heat pumps, electric lawn equipment, electric cooking, whatever piece that they might be involved with, and try to really have a good convening and discussion around the commonalities around technology and policy and affordability and different pieces. So bigger and better this year. It's going to be happening at the Davis Center on Monday. We have Jigger Shah, well-known energy leader in the country, is going to join us as the keynote. We'll have panels on affordability, resilience, and policy. I'll be moderating the policy panel. And we're looking forward to a good convening there of that group, and just another good effort to try to bring together some folks and generate continued momentum at a tough time for strategic electrification. So we're excited about that.
Question on that one.
Yeah.
Is it going to be available electronically afterwards, or any recordings of
That's a good question. I think we are going to put out a media advisory, so it could be that some members of the media decide to join. I don't know that we have, it's not like
not gonna be-
Facebook Live or
Yeah,
anything
we're
like
not
that
gonna
that I'm
be
aware of. So
necessarily recorded.
yeah, I don't know that there will be a full recording. It's a good question, and I can ask our partners at Rev, who have been amazing in putting together the logistics around that.
Okay.
It's a good
Thank
question. So I'll double check. We are in the very final stage of getting our net zero energy roadmap data for 2025, which is our most current update that we'll have. And I'm hoping to present that to the City Council as early as later this month, pending confirmation on their schedule. So if that ends up being the case, I'd be presenting at council prior to presenting at commission, which would be the next meeting, I think, is in early May. So we'll certainly do a full presentation at commission as well. And I'll let you know if we have that presentation, get you the materials so you have them commensurate with when they would be going to the city council. Of note this year, we're working to, this has been feedback we've received in the past, particularly at council, we're working to try to weather normalize the thermal data, Synapse is, so that we can get a sense, because we've had some years where the weather was warmer and there was more of a dip in the thermal data. We've had some years, and this will end up being one of them, where it's colder and we would expect a rebound in thermal usage given that. So having the weather normalized data can kind of show the trajectory independent of whether we had a cold or a warm winter, and it'll give us a better sense of how we're doing on thermal side. So excited to present the updated information later this month, hopefully at City Council, and then to the Commission as well in May. And last but not least on this list anyhow, we did also have a press release around the issuance of the Net Zero Energy and Grid Reliability Revenue Bond, the $20 million bond that was supported by voters in 2024. We issued through the Vermont Bond Bank, and we had a joint press release with them talking about the bond and the process by which we work together. So we have essentially drawn down the remainder of the 2022 revenue bond that's been expended. So we're now starting to work on using the $20 million Net Zero Energy Grid Reliability Revenue Bond. And you'll see that start to take, it'll be a little bit in FY26, but really it'll start to take effect fully with our FY27 capital budget. So once we get to that presentation. And I think that's most of what I had for the update. Glad to answer questions.
Commission have any questions?
Question. Darren, is there any update regarding the DPS ordered administrative audit?
Yes. There is currently, there has not been an audit
Right.
currently, obviously. My understanding is that they had issued an RFP for firms, and they may have received bids at this point, but I don't believe, or if they have, they haven't notified us that they've selected a partner yet to do that work. So we're waiting to hear who they would have selected and then have a schedule with that vendor. My hope is we'll know this month who that is. And then my hope as well would be that from a time frame standpoint, we'd be working through kind of the remainder of this calendar year on that process. There's a separate process that's happening for sort of all of the municipal utilities in the state, and I think all the utilities generally with DPS, where they're trying to look at broader kind of fiscal health and operational and reliability issues and how you're doing in each of those areas. I think partly precipitated by the Hyde Park utility issues that happened. So we have a meeting for this week, actually, Emily Munir, James, with DPS to kind of initiate that part of the review. So that'll be happening relatively simultaneously, covering some, not pure overlap, but there's some overlap perhaps between those two efforts.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission on the GM update? Okay.
Good timing. I
Thank you.
filibustered long enough to
Thank
have Emily
you.
join us.
Managers bringing us the data. Emily, good timing. You're good.
Just to get my notes up here. Here we go. There we go. Okay. Right, budget versus actual results for the month of February, FY 2026. We had an actual net income for the month of $1,460,000. That was better than our budgeted target of 1.2 million, so a variance of $222,000, positive variance. For the year to date, our actual net income is just over 3.5 million as compared to budget as of that time of just over 2.5 million. So we're $992,000 favorable to budget for the fiscal year to date. In February, working down from the top, sales to customers slightly better than budget. Other revenues very slightly lower than budget. Power supply revenues lower than budget by $104,000. That's due to, again, as we've discussed a few times this year, lower volumes of RECs available for sale due to lower production from our renewable resources in prior periods. Working down into operating expense, I think this is the first time in my 6.5 years I've ever seen this. Net power supply was on the money. So a $1,000 variance on a what was a $3.2 million line item for the month. There were some various, within that, fuel, purchase power, transmission, nothing was on budget, but everything added up together
Nice
to
work.
be on budget. Operating expense, favorable variance of $125,000. Depreciation a little bit more due to timing. Taxes a little bit better as they have been throughout the year. And then below the line in other income and deductions, that was a positive variance of $111,000, all adding up to the favorable result. No questions, I'll move to the next page.
Right, just a quick
Yep.
one, maybe you're covering in the next page, I'm trying to remember if it's mentioned. So forgive me if it is. Are you seeing any ripple effects from increased pricing on fuel? I know it's not necessarily in generation, but is there any ripple effects from global pricing challenges yet? I know this, again, this is a little bit of a
Yeah,
ways back
it's,
still in the daily changing
it will
world.
be in the budget slides as a current unknown.
Okay, got it.
Not seeing any immediate effects due to our long-term contracts
Yep.
for energy.
Right. not
And the generating resources that we do have that use liquid fuels. We've purchased, we're not making massive purchases, for fuel oil to run wood loaders, for example. So we're not affected by that volatility at the moment.
Has like a moderate,
Negligible and-
well, it has a moderate input in terms of our wood chip procurement, because, diesel.
That's true, yeah.
Diesel's
yeah.
a component of what goes into a wood chip cost. So
Mhm.
we had set up, I don't know, how many years ago? Like a couple years ago, 3 years
at
ago,
least, yeah.
a relatively automated pricing system that accounts for changes in fuel costs as an input for suppliers. So, so we saw, I think, a couple notch, like 3-notch change between March and April on that. So that's an impact. It's not a major impact at the moment, given the timing, but it's an impact.
And when does most of that procurement is not now, correct? You wait till.
Wood
you
fuel
start-
procurement?
Yeah.
We
you
do
start-
it every week, really.
Oh, you are? I was
But the
thinking-
volumes are lower right now,
Oh.
typically in the, shoulder season, and higher in the wintertime, for example. So, yeah, we didn't bring in the same volume, like, say, last week that we would have brought in January. So the volume's lower, but we're always bringing in some volume.
I was thinking you stockpiled it and then went down on.
That's
supply
true.
in summer. Oh,
That is
okay.
true. It comes in at different volumes during the year, but even when we're in an outage, we'll still have some volume coming in
Sure.
for that purpose. Yeah.
Darren, can I just add too, if we end up doing the shorter term energy contract we do, the more of an impact these market effects will have on us. So, being the spot markets for energy have moved up with the events in the Gulf. And if we do a very short-term transaction, we would next.
All right, capital spending February for the fiscal year to date is 5.4 million, compared to the budget at this point in the year of about 11.3 million. We are just over 1/3 spent of the total $15 million capital budget for the fiscal year. And operating cash, let me just check this quickly. That's about 15 million. I want to say that was exactly what we had budgeted. But let me just go to the last slide. Page, I mean. Yeah, that's just about exactly what we had budgeted. So that's on track. Let me go back. Sorry. And the credit rating factors, the debt service coverage ratio is at 4.86, adjusted at 1.22, and 148 days cash on hand, including the line of credit. Happy to take any questions. Great, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready for the next topic.
Okay, that's the budget, right.
Can I give a little context while you load it?
Please.
Okay, so since we also have some newer commissioners, just to lay out kind of our process with the budget, we'll come this evening with a draft budget. It is still in process. It's not a final product. The numbers that are represented here are not numbers that will be final. We'll continue to be working on them, and they will improve from here. So this is more of a progress report than an actual budget presentation. We'll give you a range in terms of what we expect rate changes to be. We'll give you factors in terms of what's affecting the budget. We will then be at Board of Finance to present to the city on April 29th, which is coming up later this month. By that point, we'll expect to have a final or very near final budget presentation that we'll present there. And then we will present you with a final budget presentation, including a final rate change proposal for your review and vote. Separate vote on the rate and the budget item, but each would be getting a vote for your May meeting. So that's just a little bit of a window there. From there, the rate change proposal will go to the Board of Finance and then the City Council for approval. The budget will travel with the city budget, which typically gets reviewed and approved in mid to late June. So that's where we go. And then the rate case goes to the PUC, the budget goes into effect. So with that wind up.
Wait, 1 second, so it's approved by council and in theory us, and then it's put into a June budget, which then is a third step of approval that could then.
For the budget, it's approved by you and it's approved by the city council.
Right.
But it travels, the budget itself travels with the city budget.
Right.
So that'll happen in June. The rate number will actually go to Board of Finance probably in May, I think is what we were thinking.
After the
After
commission.
you've considered
Yeah.
it and voted on it. It would go to the Board of Finance and then the city council probably in early June. And then we try to file it with the PUC by mid-June typically, so that the surcharge that takes effect can take effect after a couple of months into the new fiscal year, typically September 1, I believe.
Okay, I'm a little confused. April review with the council is what again?
So April 29th is our first sort of review of the budget with the Board of Finance. So we'll be presenting a much more kind of in-depth version of what we're presenting to you tonight and with final or near final numbers.
Okay.
And then you'll get the same presentation in May.
Okay.
The Board
And
of
when
Finance,
oh,
sorry, the Board of Finance receives budget presentations from all of the city departments for informational and context purposes prior to actually voting on the city budget later.
Right,
So that's
in
what the
theory,
29th
it could be a
is.
push, something could come back after the traveling with the city budget in June. Does that ever happen?
No. So
Okay.
typically, once you've approved the budget, the final version goes to the city council. And I've never seen a scenario where it had to come back for
Okay.
any additional review to the commission. at that point, we look to implement it by July 1, and then we start tracking like we just did, you know, how are we doing relative to expectation, essentially.
Clear,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So setting some context for the different factors and challenges that we're dealing with as we try to prepare the budget. These are some of the more significant upward pressures or cost pressures on the budget, and then a couple neutral factors at the bottom. So as we've discussed, we have some long-term energy contracts expiring. Notably, the Hancock Wind contract, which expires at the end of the year. As we'll discuss later, we're working actively to replace that, but we don't have a replacement at the moment, which means that we don't have renewable energy credits from a replacement contract to count on, so to speak, for the FY27 budget. So that's about an impact of roughly $750,000. Also within that, I should have added to the slide, is the lower production volumes from prior periods are also contributing to that $750,000 delta between the rec revenue that we have in the FY26 budget, which we're not meeting, right? As we just heard, we're short on that budget line, versus the expectation that's in the FY27 budget.
So what is the offset between those two, from the actual production to the budgeting of the recs based?
It's a 6-month lag.
6-month lag, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, between generation of the credit and ability to trade it. Transmission is budgeted to be up approximately $673,000 between FY26 and FY27. Labor overhead, which is pension, retirement contributions, healthcare, dental, life insurance, workers' comp, all of the benefits for employees. That is budgeted to be up $573,000. Those are costs that we obtain from the city and HR as they sort of negotiate those prices with the benefits providers. Some new software systems being added, the replacement of our financial system, replacement of our work order and asset management system. We need to upgrade the GIS in a way that is sort of structurally different, architecturally, that's adding cost. For the financial system, the work order system, in FY28, we will have hopefully sunset the old system, and then, but for FY27, we'll be sort of paying 2 contracts at once, the new contract and the old contract, until we're fully cut over. Inflation and price increases across a number of line items, materials and supplies, and maintenance contracts being 2 of the more major. The energy efficiency utility budget, which I'm sure Chris will explain later, is decreased in FY27 as a result of the potential study done by the Department of Public Service that sort of serves to set the budgets for the 3-year budgets for all of the energy efficiency utilities. The decrease in the EEU budget means that a higher piece of the EEU expense is being borne by BED operating. That's the impact, really. Lower customer contributions to capital projects and lower grant reimbursement to the tune of about $750,000. And then increased interest expense due to the new borrowing, the new revenue bond, adding about $672,000. We don't have debt rolling off this year, so as debt matures, the total interest expense will decrease in 2031, but we'll be carrying an additional amount for the next several years.
And can you explain, what does lower customer contributions to capital mean?
Yes, so for certain capital projects, think, for example, the Champlain Parkway, Great Street, Main Street. our crews do work related to street light or moving of utility infrastructure for which we are compensated by the project. And there's fewer of those kinds of projects scheduled or anticipated in FY27.
Similar question, I mean, from, I guess, past reviews, that the budget, actual versus budget for like labor has been a bit high this year because of the capital projects.
Yes.
We're assumed to pick that up. Has anything changed in the budget for next year relative to that? Given that line item there, it sounds like it has.
Yeah, so capital is one area that we will need to scrutinize and focus on in the next few weeks, or between now and when we bring you a revised final budget in May. The high capital budget for FY26 helped on the operating side by having a lot of capitalized labor.
But what happened, if I can add, but if my understanding is correct, though, that we ended up going over budget for that reason.
That's
We
right.
did not execute the
Yes.
capital projects.
Yes,
because
you're right.
people were still here. Okay.
Yes, you're right.
So
I
guess
think, to your point, we're trying to be a little more conservative in this budget with how much we assume for capitalized labor.
And that's where I'm heading. Yeah,
From a
that's
real,
what-
and frankly, how much we assume for capital overall. Like, I think you're gonna see a lower assumed capital budget and a more conservative labor allocation of capital. It doesn't mean
Okay.
it won't still be higher than what we end up doing. It could be, but we're tightening some of those assumptions.
That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
the gist of
but
my
that's a
question.
tightrope to walk,
Yeah.
right? Which is, it makes solving your income statement budget and your ADSCR more challenging, so.
And is there ability to scale labor accordingly, or is that as
According
capital
to-
projects shift and change and grow, or is it pretty constant, the need, like, for labor?
Oh, I see what
supply?
you're saying. No, it's generally pretty constant, right? Like, most of the capitalized labor is in the distribution system, then the line crews and the field crews,
Okay.
right? And there's just a certain amount of maintenance that has to be done on the distribution system every year.
Sure.
It's just a matter of which specific, switches, substations, lines are being worked on. At the bottom, as I mentioned, a couple things that are relatively constant, so there's essentially no growth assumed in kilowatt hour sales. That's based on the load forecast that Itron performed for us. And prices for RECs are still relatively strong as they were when we were setting the FY26 budget, so that hasn't changed. So when we first, our budget process begins in January. We ask all the individual units across BED, send in your capital budgets, send in your operating budgets, send in your labor assumptions. So initially, we think in order to have Moody's metrics where we want them to be, we need a net income of about $2 million. When we first added up everything, we had a net loss of 3.5. So gap of approximately 5.5 million. That's where we were in the middle of March. It's kind of a weird order that I didn't think about, but we'll just roll with that. So in the capital budget, most of it, a big portion of it is distribution system investments, as it is every year. A major project for FY27 that is not a perennial, is in every 30 years, I think, is relicensing of the Winooski 1 dam through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That involves a lot of consulting and engineering studies. That is a capitalizable expense because you can amortize it across the lifetime of the license, right? You're investing all this effort and money to be able to operate that generator for 30 years. The IT projects that I gave an update on not too long ago will be finishing up the customer system and the portal and mobile work system along with it. We'll be kicking off the financial system, as I mentioned, and the work order system, as well as the GIS upgrade and the outage management system. Continued fleet electrification, most notably an electric forklift, and replacing a front loader for McNeil, which is a pretty major item. Our federal EV charging grant is in litigation, so that's an uncertainty. That's almost $5 million if that is ever obligated, which would help with that grant line that I mentioned before. So major assumptions, the rate increase is not determined yet. We're estimating it to land around 3 to 4% effective on bills rendered September 1st, as Darren mentioned before. Strategic electrification rebates are currently budgeted at almost twice our compliance requirement, so we are wanting to continue to invest at a strong level in strategic electrification.
Can I ask a question on that? Is that because of volume of rebates or just the amount given per
Both. We do have, some of the strongest rebates in the state, but also we want to, do a strong volume. And also some of that budget is not for the routine prescriptive measures like heat pumps and cars and bicycles. It's for custom projects, so working with commercial industrial customers on like a new geothermal heating system for Burlington High School, for example.
But
It
like
would be
being at-
those kinds of things that are driving that.
I was just going to say, being at 1.8x, we're typically over the 1.0
Yes.
level for our
Yes.
strategic electrification rebates, and that's a very conscious decision by this organization to say, we're not just going to do the minimum of what's been asked for us at the state level. We have a more ambitious plan locally with the net zero roadmap, and we know to drive change, we're going to need to do more. And we actually supported in the 2024 Renewable Energy Standard a provision that made it into law that said the state requirement is a floor, not a ceiling. So we are permitted and encouraged, not required, but encouraged to be able to go above and beyond. So that's essentially part of our commitment on electrification and climate.
It also reflects the gap between, because we account for these rebates using an inventory system, we account for the credits, the Tier 3 credits that we produce. So we have a cash budget that is higher than the compliance expense amount that, so we want to be able to continue to support with our cash funds rebates at a high level, but the amount that we'll put in operating expense is less because it's on a unit cost basis, and we only expense what we need to comply. And then we bank the rest for future years, because our compliance obligation grows and grows and grows every year. And as we will get harder, theoretically it's going to get harder to meet every year as the obligation grows. So we'll be able to put some aside and use in future periods. Sorry.
Regarding the 3 to 4% projected rate increase, I feel like, at least I know since you started.
I thought I might get this question.
You know where I'm going with
I know
this, right?
exactly where you're going with it.
Okay.
He's prepared.
I
He
do.
He knows exactly.
I know what you're asking. So just for context, we had, coming out of the pandemic, we had a 7.5%, which was our first rate case in 12 years. Not even what we needed at the time, but what we thought we could manage for our customers. Then we had a 3.95%. Then we had 2 straight years of having 5.5%. Then last year we had the 4.5%. And the goal has been, can we get to a 3%? Both because that's sort of relatively where the level of inflation is right now. It also happens to be where you can have a non-litigated rate case potentially under authority that's provided in statute for municipal utilities. So we've never been able to utilize that. It's been a goal of ours to utilize it. I will be extremely happy if we come back to you in May and say that's our plan for FY27, both because it'll be a good thing from a staff standpoint, not to have to spend all of the time that we would normally spend litigating a rate case, be able to put that time towards our power supply, our batteries, our regulatory work, but also, and more importantly, for our customers, I know it would be a real benefit at a time when a number of different things are increasing in price, and there's a lot of affordability challenges. If we're able to be at a level of inflation, that is actually quite an accomplishment in the electric sector right now, because utility rates are going up well above the level of inflation. So we are very hopeful to be at that level, but we're trying to leave ourselves some room here as we continue to work to make sure we don't overpromise in the near term. So back in May with more on that.
Is there, it sounds like a very oversimplified question, but is there a way to get to, do you feel like we keep chasing the tiger by the tail on this one?
Yeah.
And I get it, there's plenty of things that keep on
Yeah.
making it harder and harder to get to that goal.
Right.
Is there,
Yeah.
what can we bring to bear to actually see that?
This is what I would offer.
Somewhere down the road, I'd love to see this somewhere down the road where
Yeah.
that is the case, and,
And it may be-
we've been able to mitigate to the point where.
It may be this year, but I also want to caution that it doesn't necessarily mean if we achieve it this year that we can achieve it every year.
Right.
Because some of our cost pressures are continuing to grow. Even just taking, I think I'm stealing from a future slide, so apologies. But if you think about transmission costs, right? Like, we're seeing routine $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 increases in transmission costs that just have not abated. And there's actually some additional transmission pressure, which Emily will get to on this slide. So just that thing alone, every year, having to absorb that, puts some pressure on rates, and obviously, healthcare costs and other labor overhead, all these different things, they put pressure on rates. So I think, and we are striving, just to be clear, we are striving to achieve this this year, if at all possible. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that we've solved all structural issues to the point that we can expect that every year. So I just want to be very transparent with the commission that we know it's a good moment to achieve it. And if we do achieve it, it would not necessarily mean that we wouldn't need something more next year. Each year is its own kind of challenge, obviously. But I do appreciate you've been a constant voice on this point for good reason, and I hope we're able to do that this year.
Okay. Darren touched on this earlier, but proceeds from the new 2026 revenue bond are assumed to support the capital plan, as is the annual $3 million general obligation bond issued through the city. As discussed before, energy prices have been volatile even over the past day. So we will be continuing to watch those, and the policy and planning team has been looking at sort of, rather than using the prices du jour, what is a reasonable assumption to make. There's a couple different methodologies, right, one could use. So we're evaluating that. The IBEW contract expires June 30. We are currently in negotiations with the union, including about the cost of living adjustment for FY27 and then subsequent years of the contract, contract term TBD. But we don't have a set agreed to cost of living increase yet, because there's no contract yet for July 1, so that's an unknown. And as Darren mentioned, I won't get too deep into this, but the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued an order in a case that has been being litigated since 2011 that has to do with the amount of return on equity that the New England transmission owners can claim. And the upshot is this will, they lowered the allowed return on equity. This will reduce our ISO transmission bill, but it will increase our Velco transmission bill. And unfortunately, the net is not a positive, or the net is a positive cost. So our ISO bill will go up, but not more than the Velco bill. The ISO bill goes down, but not more than the Velco bill goes up. There is also there's a looking forward part of this for what transmission costs will be going forward. And then there's also a resettlement and pay everybody back for the 15 years of difference between what the return on equity was and what FERC says it should have been. for those 15 years. So we're in discussions with Velco about how to handle that. All of the Vermont distribution utilities are involved. So that's a evolving topic.
Yeah,
And
and not unique to BED, and nothing
Right.
we did. This is a broader New England transmission
Exactly.
issue that we're just impacted by, and every utility in Vermont will be impacted by.
And it's hard to wrap my head around the transmission thing, but is there any entity that can affect the rising transmission costs in some way? Or like,
In Vermont, it's hard, because we're
Yeah.
a relatively small share of the region, and and there have been efforts by Velco and the Department of Public Service to sort of engage in other state and regional conversations to make sure that investments are being made, are being scrutinized appropriately. So there is an element there for regional advocacy, but part of the challenge is that, and the reason why this is impacting us the way it is that typically Vermont has been getting more value back from being part of the system than we're paying in. And so when the value of the return is reduced, of course, then that impacts us disproportionately in a way, where it may have different impacts in another state. So it's a complex issue. I've likened it a few times to sort of like the state property tax issues that are being discussed in, education reform context. Like it's not like a straightforward kind of proposition. And one of the ways to get value for Vermont is to make sure we're investing in transmission projects and getting an equity rate of return. But at the same time, we want to make sure that all the various components within the region are doing things prudently and keeping costs under control. And even in a scenario where we do regional advocacy, there is so much baked into the system, so many projects that are happening, both from an aging grid reliability standpoint and maybe for other reasons that if you look at our financials from, a 15-year kind of time span, the thing that will stand out to you, one thing that will stand out to you is the relative, unabated march of transmission costs upward. And of course, I know I'm going to steal again from a future slide, but kilowatt hour sales, or that was a prior slide, but our sales have not really kept up with that. So there's a disconnect there, a structural disconnect, which gets to why it's hard to hit this 3%, where we're facing upward costs, but we don't have rising usage. In fact, we've had relatively declined usage over a period of time. We want it to rise for good reasons, because people are electrifying and reducing emissions, not because they're being wasteful with energy, of course, because Chris is here and we want to talk about efficiency in a good way. But in a scenario where we had more electrification driving upward kilowatt hour sales along with new development, which is obviously occurring, it makes it easier to absorb those transmission cost increases. And in a relatively flat sales environment, when you have those types of structural increases, that puts pressure on rates.
thanks.
All right, so with all of that, the work we have done in the past month is we've reduced the gap to about $2 million. So we have, the current budget has a very small, as you can see, a net loss of about $286,000. This is yellow because it's preliminary and is definitely going to change. You can see here, this is the operating loss. Right, so this is where the problem is with the adjusted with the debt service coverage ratios, right? And then ending cash is also too low. This needs to be more in the 13 million range. And it's only at 8 right now. And then the capital plan, as I said, we need to work on this as well. We're assuming about 5.5 from the revenue bond. I looked at sort of our spending or drawdown rate for the 2022 revenue bond. And so I'd like to be around no more than 6 million a year. That gives you kind of 3 full fiscal years, and then for the $20 million borrowing, and then a couple million that we're probably going to spend sort of the remainder of this fiscal year. And then the GO bond adds in 3 million more, so that's kind of leaving 3.4 million right now funded out of cash reserves, right, which is what's dinging that ending cash balance at the moment. So we have some work to do there. And then I said, as the metrics, these are nowhere near where they need to be. We would like the adjusted debt service coverage ratio at the 1.2 mark ideally, and days cash on hand with the line of credit should be, in the 130s range ideally. So I think that is, that's all I had as a presentation, but we're happy to take any questions.
My question on the capital, I guess, internal capital, it's a much larger number. What's driving that? It was like 6.4 projected on the.
Oh,
versus
yes.
It looks like it was 3 each of the last 2
Right,
years.
right. That's just a function of limiting the revenue bond funded portion of the capital budget, and then the remainder is essentially what's left. So we need to reduce the total capital budget so that the remainder is more
Okay.
in
So
line with
that's-
3 million.
okay.
Yeah.
It's possible we might use a little more of the revenue bond assumption as well, because that would also draw that down.
Mhm.
So between those two things, we'll get
Yeah.
it where it needs to be.
That's why I saw, the cash has dropped pretty significantly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's really the critical piece at this point. Okay.
Yep.
I think you just answered this in that last sentence, but are you feeling as you march towards the April 29th and the May, meetings that you're going to get there? Are you feeling?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
We do it every year,
Yep.
and we'll do it again this year. And it
Just
always
asking
looks,
directly.
it always looks insurmountable when we start, always. And, the city has a budget process, obviously, where similarly, there tends to be a gap initially that's dealt with over a period of time with different things. So we've started pretty traditionally with a gap. It's been higher. I think it's been as high as a $10 million gap during the pandemic era. So 5.5 is not easy, but it's not as bad as we've seen. And then we've always been able to do the work over a very intensive period, typically between March and May, with the executive team and certain members of the leadership team, particularly James and Amanda, our finance director, are involved in getting the capital budget tuned to where it needs to be, making sure that the sources of financing are matching up well with that, squeezing the operating expenses to keep them as low as possible, and making sure we're still funding the priorities, because we don't want to just hit a certain number. We really need to make sure we're making all the right investments too. So there are things we could do that would be penny wise, pound foolish, and we try to avoid doing those things too. But I am confident we will have a final budget to present to Board of Finance April 29th and to you all in early May that achieves what we've talked about here.
Sort of thinking longer term and about like flat sales growth in light of all the electrification. I know obviously efficiency is a factor there that has reduced demand, but in light of all the heat pumps that have been installed and car charging and all that other stuff, can you help me understand like how it, why it's flat with such an emphasis on those things, and what like the is it Itron? I can't remember who
Yeah.
did the,
Mhm.
the
right.
Itron study forecast is saying it's going to be over the next number of years. I know you've talked about sort of where we're planning to get to in terms of capacity in Burlington,
Yep.
so it'd be helpful to revisit that.
I mean, I would just throw out that we have about 3,200 heat pumps installed. Most are residential or multifamily buildings. There's some commercial, obviously, as well, but a lot of residential heat pumps. We've got about 12 to 1,400 or 1,500 plug-in vehicles in the city. The overall kind of light-duty vehicles have typically been between 21,000 and 25,000. So, a growing but still small relative percentage. And I think because partly residential is only a quarter of our use, so
Right.
we're affecting a piece of the pie that's not the biggest piece. But also, even if you think about a geothermal system like we have at certain buildings, we have Hula's geothermal in Champlain, and the new high school is going to be geothermal. Thankfully, it's a very good electrification technology, and we support it 100%, but it doesn't necessarily drive a huge volume of sales growth, and all those buildings tend to have solar as well, which, produces on site and, you can get credits from that through different things. So, you think about it in the commercial sector, the electrification hasn't necessarily taken off in the volume that you would want to see to start to impact sales in a major way that kind of comes out of the noise, the average, flat to 1% a year kind of growth that we're seeing. The second piece is bigger than the electrification, at least so far, has really been the impact of different kind of developments within the city, like Blodgett leaving, obviously, or something about, is it Coffee Cup? Coffee
That's
Cup,
right.
and nothing's replaced that specific spot yet. We have phase 1 of City Place is operating now. Phase 2 is very much under construction. The new high school, obviously, under construction. I'm not sure how much of that all coming online this coming fiscal year is fully captured in that sales forecast or not, so it may well be conservative, perhaps, from that standpoint. And to the extent we continue to see, and Chris will probably touch on this, we've seen a lot of challenges with like new development, new business kind of development, different things like that. But to the extent those things kind of continue to return from the pandemic lows, that drives the kilowatt hour sales growth more than the level of electrification does currently. Where our hope is we get to a scale with electrification where you really do see it more so as a driver of sales, not necessarily peak, because you mentioned capacity. We're trying to make sure we have the peak capacity to serve the demand, but we'd love to drive as much of the sales growth to off-peak as we can and have the system overall be as efficient as it can be. So I would offer that. I think you've said similar things in the past as well. Those are some of the factors, I think, with the sales growth. It certainly has rebounded since the pandemic, just not to levels of like what we saw in, say, 2005 or 2015 in some cases. It's still kind of, relatively flat.
Thanks.
Longer answer probably than I needed to give.
That was really helpful.
Okay.
I have just a question on I know nothing can be predicted, but we had somewhat of a level of volatility with a really cold winter and then the McNeil production shortfall and, even a bunch of different issues on production. So as you look forward into the year ahead, do you think that those volatility, I don't want to call them issues, things could increase or stay flat, or like it looks like your numbers you're trying to stick to sort of as we've been historically, but how are you thinking about that?
Jared, can I add a quick one on that, maybe?
Sure.
Sure.
Just in general, the budget has to be a single value. So, the city council will approve a single value. When we're doing longer-term planning, i.e. the IRP or anything like it, even 5-year, we can look at ranges of values. But for the budget purposes, we do have to pick a single forecast to use to create a... Does that help?
Yeah, I think I understand that. I'm just thinking as you're planning and budgeting, like how are you thinking about that?
Well, so we also, I think they mentioned earlier that we're looking at the energy prices, right? Do we use the current energy prices? Well, that will have an effect on our budget, right? It may not be accurate based on history to use just today's energy prices and go with that. So we are looking at different scenarios of energy prices that we might use in the budget and what those different scenarios do to the budget. So we're certainly trying to understand it, but again, back to we still need to have a single budget. But yeah, again, we're looking at those variables and how they change over time and what the effect of using a today's value versus a multi-year average value, all of those kinds of things.
I think another kind of way to think about it, like we've been through some very different years in terms of how the budget turns out relative to expectations, probably the most extreme being the COVID era, but we've had other factors like, energy prices changing dramatically within a given year. And one tool in the toolbox that we've used and that we would use again if we saw extreme variability potentially or something that was unexpected is the regulatory asset, which allows you to sort of amortize a unexpected cost over a period of time and not have it hit your net income and your financial statement all at once. So the 2022 energy prices are an example of that. We had a significant 7-figure impact from market changes that we were able to create a regulatory asset and amortize. And we're still, I think, kind of moving that off our books over the next few years. So that's part of our budget is that, so that's a way to smooth some volatility within the utility context. The other thing on the more controllable side of things is with McNeil, for example, we're doing during the April outage, the boiler tube mapping and some repair work there that we hope will make it more likely that the plant, has a uninterrupted operating period in the winter. So, there's some proactive work you can do with some of your assets to try to make sure that they're being, maintained well and that they don't. But my experience at BED, and this will be my 10th year coming up in January, is, I know, time flies. But my experience has been that no budget ever really matches the expectations. And when it does, it's sort of like what Emily said during the financials. The numbers might add up, but for reasons that we didn't expect.
Yeah.
So we're kind of prepared to sort of ride with the volatility and manage throughout the year. And we have a lot of experience making budget rescissions during the year if we need to manage, because we do this monthly forecast process. So we have a sense of where things might be landing and if we're tracking on or off budget. So even though the numbers we presented to you tonight are good through February for fiscal 26, our projections are showing a possibility of some diminishment in those numbers. So we've made several rounds of internal rescissions relative to the forecast to try to lock in those better numbers. And we'll manage like that, throughout the year. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Emma. Next, we have Chris
You
coming to
coming up?
give us an energy efficiency update. Thank you, Chris.
Have you met everyone? Okay. Just want to make sure. Tom's one of our unsung regulatory heroes over here, doing a lot of work on this efficiency regulatory side of things.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back in to give you an update on our energy efficiency programs. Wanted to go over where we are in our 3-year performance period for 24-26, describe some of the metrics that we talked a little bit about the last time Energy Services visited with you. We're held to a series of minimum performance requirements and quantifiable performance indicators, very similar across the 3 EEUs, with some differences. And then just the team has all talked about headwinds and challenges in 2026 and beyond, and wanted to give you an update there and a little bit about what the current potential study going into the next demand resource plan is looking like for 27, 29. So as we reported to you in September, program activity in 24 and 25 really sluggish, especially in commercial existing buildings and commercial new construction. Again, not unique to BED's EEU. We check in with our partners at EVT and VGS. We report to the PUC every year, and the commercial sector statewide is sluggish. And it's for all the reasons that I think Darren and Emily talked about. And I think there's an added pressure in Burlington due to some of our community issues. And folks are just not investing in their buildings. They are telling us that they want things to last longer. Can we help? Let's think about your homes and you're like, okay, can I get one more year out of my roof? Can I get one more year out of my heating system? These business owners are definitely thinking that way. When sales are down, think about the commercial food service, they don't have the cash flow. They're just trying to get through the month. So we don't see that softening, enough quickly. So we are doing things like you heard from Jennifer Green last month, the 2030 district, the partnerships with VGS. We're meeting with the CEDO Business Services team this month to just take our collaboration to the next level and see what we can do. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure customers know we're here to help. And that could just be energy coaching, or it could be making some kind of improvement that has savings associated with it that can help our EEU goals. The other aspect of this is we have the existing program, the existing buildings, and we have the new construction. And I think I described this a little bit last time, but we sit on the technical review committee out of permitting. And that is when a major development comes in and sits with all the major departments, and they're hearing from water, wastewater, electric, and saying fire, and it basically says, before you go too crazy on design and spending a lot of money, are there issues that the departments bring up that you really want to put into your design before you go much further? We're there to talk about our programs, energy code, the ordinances. It gives us an opportunity to get early into the project, so the project doesn't go too far before we're able to try to influence it. And in 2025, there were only 2 monthly meetings, and there's only been 1 so far in 2026. In my career, that even going through some of the recessions, that is as low as I've seen it. So it means people are not pulling permits. They're not starting to think about new projects. And our DRP, our potential study, is always looking at, all right, what's coming down the pike that we can influence, especially when buildings are going more heat pump, because then we can get not only the efficiency of the equipment, we get the envelope. Before, it used to be Vermont Gas would take care of all of that. Now we can take care of the whole building. So when new construction permitting goes down, that makes the assumptions that we bake into our DRP, the 24-26 DRP, started in 2022. So it's a long horizon and things can change. So, but real quickly, here are the NPRs that we're held to. The first one is minimum electric benefits. It's the avoided cost of energy divided by the total cost of what it takes to run the programs. So we're held to a 3-year score, and we do it every year. We take a look. Unfortunately, we needed to do some work to update it now, but it'll be in the May 1st, 2026 annual report, which is when we have to report out our 2025 performance to the regulators. The next one is equity in residential ratepayers. The department and the PUC are well aware that we're 75-25 in terms of our revenue, so the EEC is collected that way. And they want to make sure that we are returning benefits to our residential ratepayers. They are also very well aware how we're 60% rental. They want to make sure that we're creative, we're focused, and we're returning benefit to that sector. The other one is equity for low-income customers, and that is to make sure that our programs are aligned to work with affordable housing communities, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, all of those folks that we're bringing benefits to them. In number 2, equity for residential ratepayers and low income, we're doing quite well. That's where we are as of the end of Q1 2026. The other one is equity for small business customers. As we've probably talked about before, our top 20 customers consume over 50% of all the electricity. So if you're running an energy efficiency program, you might want to go concentrate only on them, but that doesn't, that's not fair because everyone's paying into the EEC. So there's a metric there for us to make sure that we're going after small business as well. And I'll pause there on NPRs before going on to QPIs.
Are you concerned with that 58% for number 4?
Can I get back there? No. Well, so lighting was very helpful, as you know.
Extremely.
It could be very helpful. So this is getting a little trickier. We still have until the end of 2026, we have a window to go after the 4-foot fluorescents. Yeah. But this is a restaurant buying a new reach-in, a restaurant, doing an upgrade to their walk-in. It's tougher stuff. It's widgets that last longer, and they're more expensive than doing a lighting job. Okay. So we're going to have less opportunities on this one. But You know, we're roughly 75% through the period, 58. I'm hopeful.
Yep. Thank you.
Our QPI's total resource benefit is the present worth of the lifetime of electric, fossil, and water benefits. We're at about 38% right now. Again, there's a statewide screening tool that's involved and some calculations that we'll update that again in the 2025 annual report, which we do put on the website after May 1. Electric savings, that's the megawatt hours, that's the kilowatt hours. So our goal was 12,170, and right now we're at 33. I'll get a little bit more into what we have in the pipeline. We also track summer peak KW savings, 23% there. Winter peak demand savings, 32. Weighted lifetime. It is the megawatt hours times the weighted lifetime of all the measures. So you're basically saying, okay, which I think in 2025 was 17 years. So it can be HVAC equipment, it can be LED lighting, it can be the whole portfolio. You assign a weighted lifetime to it, and that's how you come up with your lifetime savings. So again, we're behind a bit on that. Administrative efficiency. This is one that basically asks the EEU to lean their processes and try to reduce the EEC, the energy efficiency charge, that's baked into the budget. Can we do this for less administrative cost? So that metric, shows us doing pretty well. And I would say that one of the reasons we do pretty well is, working with Emily's team and the policy and planning team and other folks, finance, we've really been able to lean some of just the moving of paper around, getting things processed. So, and there's more to do with some of the new, the CIS and some of the other stuff that's coming our way. So the headwinds and challenges, our commercial programs are 75% of our savings and budget. Business existing facility is huge and always has been, and they're the folks that are probably hurting the most right now. And I would include our larger institutionals in there as well. They talk about bandwidth issues, staffing issues. It's very expensive to do anything, labor and materials. So even our largest institutions are doing the same thing. They're trying to get more out of their equipment. We're trying to get them to at least capital plan. Let's not do an emergency replacement on a major piece of equipment. Let's think about your RTUs. Let's think about, your chiller. Are you already running these things beyond their useful service life? We don't want you to make a 5-minute decision because you need that back, and you're not going to make it an optimized decision. So that's kind of where we're putting some of our effort now, while folks are not really wanting to invest too much in their buildings. For quarter 4, 2025, two things are happening. Things are improving. They're improving with some of our largest customers. Some of these projects have been since COVID, meaning we started the conversation, we did the analysis, they just have not been able to pull the trigger. But some of these projects, we know they're going to happen. They're actually going on now. These are usually more complicated HVAC, the building energy management systems, changing the sequence of operations, or actually changing out, very large chillers, which we talk about in the monthly report. So if these things land, we think we can right the ship a little bit from where it is right now and get to 75 to 85% of the performance goals, and expend 85 to 95% of the budget. That's not where we want to be. That's not where the regulators want us to be. But I just wanted to give the best projection, considering the struggles of the economy and what's happening with our customers. And I think that's it.
I think I know the answer, but do you feel comfortable and confident with the transparency regulators? They are aware of this, where you are on the journey, aware of all your mitigation efforts?
Yes. So once a year, there's a workshop with the EEUs in front of the full PUC. And they will eventually comment, and they'll send out a memo, and sometimes the memo will say, we order you to follow up, we want the following information from one or all of the EEUs. This one, the chair acknowledged the difficulties because all 3 EEUs, and we did not talk beforehand, came in with the same story. The business customers in Vermont are hurting. Not that the residential aren't, but it's really the business customers that drive us. So I think they do appreciate it, but that doesn't mean they don't want us to be really creative and try to work it out in any way we can. So, and I will, to Emily's point, just real quickly, the DRP that we're in right now, where that's landing is a reduced savings target and a reduced budget, because they have to go hand in hand. There's an acknowledgement from the regulators that energy efficiency is more expensive. It's just naturally trending that way. Labor and materials are more expensive. Where the easy, call it the low-hanging fruit of lighting is gone. So it's now just more difficult stuff to do. And we think it's right-sized. We think it's the potential study, which we play a strong role in, we think is better sized for our market, knowing what we know.
Do you think the tax credit rollback how's that gonna affect things, and is there any way that pricing, you're saying pricing is increasing, but do you think demand is gonna actually decrease on things like heat pumps in enough way that they might decrease pricing to accommodate that loss of the tax credit?
Tough call. Yeah, I don't.
Right now, it's steady costs, though, or going up, even though customers aren't getting a tax credit, correct?
Yeah, the cost of having heat pumps installed is definitely going up. And it's going up on the labor side because it's highly competitive to keep the techs. All our HVAC companies are really, they're playing, you can hear it on the radio, $5,000 sign-on bonus, 4 days, working weeks. So the labor, across the trades is going up, and frankly, I think it should, considering the value they bring to the building stock. But material costs are going up, clearly, and we don't see the trends changing. So,
Chris, what do you see the impact on how your structure here on future lower, if there's lower budgets and lower targets, will that have impacts on the way that you run the EEU here at BED in terms of staffing levels or scope of services and things? It's a difficult question, but it's on my mind thinking about where this is headed.
yeah, it's an interesting question. We've been here before. We've always been a small staff,
Yep.
with 4 or 5. When we see something coming, we sometimes do contracted energy services where we'll reach out to, some of the local engineering companies, use that instead of, hiring additional staff, and to just see, what's going on in the market. So managing the budget's gonna be trickier, the incentive budget. If things turn around and new construction shows up, we heard the mayor talking about housing. If Ride Your Bike LLC gets their full 1,400 units, I think 9 different buildings, if they speed up the pace of that, then we would really have to think about what we're gonna do with our budgets. We would probably have to go back in and petition for an increase or something. So it's gonna get trickier, I'm gonna say, in terms of managing the budgets and looking around the corners to see what's coming. But I can't see us going much lower than essentially the 4 or 5 we have, because we're not just doing EEU. We spend a lot of time on the Tier 3 side of the house, and we spend a lot of time, less time, but we're a service to the customer care folks. We do the high bill work and such like that, so.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the commission?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, thank you, Tom, and all of your team.
next we're going to move into executive session. Does someone wanna, make a motion to move into executive session? Thank you.
I move to find that premature general public knowledge regarding the proposed renewable energy wind contract would clearly place the Burlington Electric Department at a substantial disadvantage per Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 That's 5 ayes, no nays. Motion passes. We'll move into executive session.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, now I need a second. May I have a second, second motion?
Before you do that, can you, at the, after the word session, include the words with staff? With appropriate staff?
The second, yes, for the second one?
Yeah.
Mhm.
After the word session?
Yes.
Include that would be
Okay.
more accurate.
Thank you, Scott. I move that the commission enter executive session with necessary staff to discuss the proposed renewable energy wind contract under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1A of the Vermont statutes.
Second that?
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 5 ayes. Now we move into executive session. Thank you. The last topic on the agenda is the commissioners' check-in. Do we have any topics that commissioners would like to check in at the end of the meeting?
I do not.
I'm good.
Great. Do I have a motion to adjourn for the
So
evening?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion with 4 passes, no opposed. We are adjourned.
Peace.